Ah, look who walked into the room and made every ego go silent. Look who executed a strike so precise, so surgical, so clean, that the entire crew orbiting around your opponent went still, like someone hit a cosmic mute button. Hello, you quiet disruptor, you calm detonator, you subtle force that doesn't raise its voice, doesn't swing its fists, doesn't need theatrics, because the precision of your mind does the damage for you. You didn't embarrass them, you didn't humiliate them, you didn't even target them. You just punctured their ego with one exact move. And now every single person watching is suddenly questioning the hierarchy they used to swear by. They can't breathe the same way. They can't speak the same way. They can't even make eye contact with the person they once treated like an invincible authority. Because you didn't just win. You executed a mental checkmate they never saw coming. You flipped a board they didn't even know you were playing on. And the way it unfolded, quiet, understated, effortless, makes it even more terrifying for them. They're still sitting there replaying the moment over and over, dissecting your tone, rewinding your words, trying to understand how someone they underestimated this deeply managed to slip through every psychological defense they built around themselves. They thought they were dealing with someone predictable. They thought they were dealing with someone manageable. They thought they had you categorized, labeled, placed neatly in a mental drawer they could reach for whenever they needed to feel superior. And then you struck. Not wildly, not emotionally, not impulsively. You struck with the kind of accuracy only someone who studies people quietly, patiently, almost clinically can achieve. Let's talk about that moment. The moment everything shifted, not the part where you spoke or acted, the part right before that. The stillness, the air thickening, the subtle shift in energy only the sensitive ones noticed. Because that was the true beginning of their downfall. You weren't reacting, you were calculating. You were watching how their ego inflated every time they thought they got one over you. How their confidence swelled every time they assumed you didn't notice the mockery hidden beneath their tone. How their friends, their entire crew, cheered quietly behind them like a pack, depending on the alpha to bark on their behalf. They mistook your silence for surrender. They mistook your calm for weakness. They mistook your restraint for fear. They didn't realize you were mapping the psychological battlefield with more accuracy than they've ever mapped their own insecurities. What they didn't understand is that people like you don't move from emotion. You move from strategy. You see the board as a whole, while they only see the square they're sitting on. You let them brag. You let them gloat. You let them perform. Because you already knew the move that would collapse everything they built. And when the moment came, you didn't hesitate. You didn't stutter. You didn't question. You just executed. One statement, one maneuver, one perfectly aligned stroke of psychological clarity, and their ego imploded like a balloon meeting a needle. That's why their whole crew is quiet right now. It's not fear of you. It's fear of what you revealed. Because when you punctured that ego, you didn't just expose the leader. You exposed the entire ecosystem that depended on that leader's illusion of strength. You showed them how fragile the hierarchy was, how childish the theatrics were, how all of it, all the bravado, the posturing, the subtle jabs, were nothing more than a shaky tower built on a single insecurity they were hoping no one would ever point at. And you didn't point at it. You pierced it. Now they're spiraling, trying to figure out what the hell happened. Their group chat is quiet in the loudest possible way. Their faces are stiff, their pride bruised, their internal narratives scrambling for a way to understand the sudden shift in power. They're asking themselves questions that taste like humiliation. How did we miss that? How did they become this sharp? What else have they been noticing? Have they been reading all of us this whole time? And the truth, the one they're desperately trying not to choke on, is that you were always capable of this. You always had this level of psychological clarity. You always had this ability to dissect a situation from the inside without ever showing your hand. The problem wasn't you. The problem was the version of you they built in their minds. The version that made them comfortable. The version that kept their ego inflated. They projected simplicity onto someone complex. They projected weakness onto someone who was simply observing. They projected predictability onto someone who was quietly reconstructing reality, one inference at a time. This is why their crew is silent now. Because silence is the only language left when certainty collapses. They aren't just quiet because the leader got mentally checkmated. They're quiet because they realized how easily it could have been any of them. They're quiet because the hierarchy they relied on was exposed as a house of cards. They're quiet because they witnessed something rare, precision that doesn't announce itself. You delivered a strike without theatrics, without raising your voice, without breaking character. You delivered a strike that didn't attack a person. It attacked the narrative that held their entire social structure together. Let me tell you what actually happened beneath the surface, because they will get this part wrong every time. They will think you got bold. They will think you snapped. They will think you finally fought back. But the truth is colder, cleaner, more dangerous. You didn't lash out. You didn't retaliate. You didn't try to win. You simply chose truth over theater. And the truth, when spoken by someone who sees through illusions, is lethal. This is where their panic is coming from, not from the moment itself, but from what it reveals. That you can strike with precision at any time, and they would never see it coming. That you can read motives they didn't know they were expressing. That you can analyze patterns they thought were too subtle to detect. That you can anticipate moves before they even think about making them. This is what terrifies them. The realization that the quiet one was the real strategist all along. You didn't embarrass them publicly. You made them question themselves privately, which is far worse. Now let's talk about the deeper dynamic. Their leader's ego wasn't just a personality trait. It was the glue holding the group's confidence together. They relied on that ego to set the tone. They depended on that ego to do the talking for them. They used that ego as a shield to mask their own insecurities. But when you punctured it, cleanly, precisely, everything behind it was revealed. And what stood behind it wasn't strength. It wasn't dominance. It wasn't superiority. It was fear, fragility, inflated confidence, supported by shaky assumptions. Their crew isn't quiet because they respect you. They're quiet because they recognize themselves in the collapse. They're seeing that if one ego can be taken down with one move, then none of them are safe. They're seeing that the loudest person in the room was also the easiest one to dismantle. They're seeing that their entire social dynamic was a pyramid built on insecurity, dressed as authority. You didn't just knock the leader off the top. You exposed the foundation that doesn't exist. And here's the real brilliance. You didn't do it by trying to dominate. You did it by refusing to play the role they assigned you. People like them depend on predictability. They depend on you reacting the way they expect. They depend on you staying in the position they mentally placed you in. But you shifted, calmly, cleanly, without warning. And that shift wasn't toward aggression. It was toward clarity. Clarity is the one thing an inflated ego cannot survive. This is why they're still frozen, replaying the scene in their heads. They can't categorize what just happened. They can't label you easily anymore. They can't reduce you to a predictable response pattern. You've become an unknown variable. And in any group dynamic, the unknown variable is the most dangerous presence in the room. They don't know what you're capable of. They don't know how much you see. They don't know how long you've been analyzing them. And the possibility that you've always been 3 steps ahead is eating them alive. Let's dig deeper into the psychology of the ego you punctured. Ego thrives on illusion. It needs an audience. It needs believers. It needs people to feed it with reactions, fear, validation, submission. When you refused to feed it, when you responded with precision instead of emotion, you starved it. You didn't fight it, you dismantled it. A fragile ego cannot survive precision. It cannot handle accuracy. It cannot endure exposure. It needs chaos to hide in. And you didn't give it chaos. You gave it clarity, which is the sharpest blade a mind like yours can wield. And now, the aftermath is unfolding exactly as expected. They're pretending nothing happened while thinking about nothing else. They're creating explanations in their heads that make them feel less defeated. They're rewriting the moment in their memory to protect their pride. They're telling themselves, "You got lucky," as if luck can replicate the kind of precision you delivered. But beneath all their internal stories is the truth they will never say out loud. You saw them clearly, and they couldn't handle the reflection. Now watch what happens next. New behavior patterns will start emerging in their crew. Micro shifts, nervous shifts, hesitation in their voice when they speak around you, longer pauses, quieter reactions, avoidance of direct confrontation, subtle respect they'll never admit aloud. Because once someone sees how easily a facade collapses, they can never fully trust it again. Your move didn't end a conflict. It restructured the power dynamic permanently. They feel it. You feel it. Everyone watching feels it. And the unsettling part for them is that the shift wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some explosive spectacle they could analyze or dissect. It was clean, quiet, surgical. A single psychological incision that changed the entire landscape without leaving visible wounds. That's what disturbs them, the absence of chaos. Because chaos is something they understand. Precision is something they fear. You didn't just puncture an ego. You altered the gravitational pull of the entire group. Before, their leader was the sun they orbited around. Now the orbit is glitching. Their internal map is malfunctioning. That leader they once viewed as untouchable suddenly looks human, breakable, fallible. And what do people do when they realize their sun can burn out? They look for a new center of gravity. They start scanning the room for the one who demonstrated real force, quiet force, controlled force, the type of force that doesn't need a stage to announce itself. So while they're trying to pretend nothing has changed, their instincts are betraying them. Their instincts are turning toward you. Watch closely. Their eyes will give it away before their words ever do. Someone who used to look at you with superiority will now avert their gaze. Someone who used to smirk at you will now shift their jaw, like something is stuck there. Someone who used to interrupt you mid-sentence will suddenly wait for you to finish. They don't know why they're doing it. They just feel the new tension in the air. The tension of hierarchy rearranging itself in real time. They feel the difference between loud ego and quiet competence. They feel the weight of a mind that can dismantle illusions without raising its voice. You didn't just defeat someone. You revealed reality. And reality is the one opponent no ego can survive. Their leader is the one crumbling the fastest, even though they'll try to hide it. That ego you punctured isn't like a balloon that pops once and disappears. It's more like a cracked mirror. Every glance they take into themselves now reflects a version they don't want to admit. They feel exposed, but not publicly. Exposed internally. And that internal exposure is far more destructive, because now their entire performance is fueled by panic. The crew may not fully understand it yet, but subconsciously, they're already picking up on the leader's instability. They're sensing the micro-fractures. They're sensing the loss of control. They're sensing that the person they followed wasn't unshakable. They were untested. When someone who has never been challenged finally gets challenged, they don't know how to respond. They aren't used to recalibrating. They aren't used to reflection. They aren't used to humility. Their entire identity depends on external reinforcement, and when that reinforcement collapses, their internal world starts disintegrating. That is what's happening to them right now. Their collapse isn't loud, but it's inevitable, and their crew, whether consciously or not, is bracing for impact. Now here's the part that makes the checkmate even more devastating. Your move wasn't emotional. That's why it hit so deeply. An emotional strike invites retaliation. But a precise strike, a calculated strike, a clean strike, delivered from a place of absolute clarity, that terrifies people because they know they can't predict someone who thinks instead of reacts. They can anticipate an angry person. They can't anticipate an observant one. They can measure volume. They can't measure silence. They can prepare for chaos. They cannot defend against strategy. Your silence before the checkmate, your calm during it, and your stillness afterward. That's what rewired the room. You demonstrated control over yourself, and that means you have control over the situation. That's something their leader never had. Their dominance was performative. Yours is structural. The crew is starting to feel the difference even if they don't fully understand it yet. They're realizing they've been operating under a false assumption of power this whole time. And now that the illusion is gone, the psychological gravity is shifting toward you, whether you want it or not. There is a specific type of quiet that enters a room when someone's ego has been dissected with precision. It's not the quiet of fear. It's the quiet of recalibration. People are trying to rebuild their understanding of the hierarchy, but the blueprint they relied on has been destroyed. They don't know where to place themselves. They don't know where to place their leader. They don't know where to place you. And that uncertainty is the most powerful advantage you now possess. Uncertainty creates openings. Uncertainty creates space. Uncertainty forces people to observe instead of assume. And when people start observing you without their old biases, they begin to see your true range. The shift is subtle but inevitable. They start treating your presence differently. They start adjusting their tone around you. They start moderating their reactions. They start giving you an invisible buffer of respect that wasn't there before. They don't fully understand